Agents podcast.
Lab Coat Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Lab Coat Agents podcast. And it is very exciting today that I get to speak with a very distinguished and accomplished real estate professional, and also very young at that. We are going to be talking to the founder of Dotloop, the current founder and co-founder of a platform called Pacaso, which we are going to talk a lot about today. He is a fellow, kind of a Midwestern-ish original origin from Cincinnati. He's got a real estate background, started at the ripe old age of 18, studied it in college. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Oh, and by the way, I did notice this about you, Austin. You're also an endurance athlete. I have a passion for that as well, so we share that. I'm going to ask you a question about that. Welcome to the show, Austin Allison, my friend.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be here.
And now, by the way, I had to throw in the Cincinnati because it's not often I interview people that are in the Midwest. They're almost always on the East Coast or the West Coast, and I'm here stuck right in the middle. And so now you're out in Napa. So you joined the masses. But tell our audience a little bit about your background. Like, obviously I mentioned where you come from, but how'd you come up in business? What drove you to study real estate in college? That's not a common thing that students typically follow. They typically follow parents, right? What led you to where you are today, which, by the way, you founded Dotloop like right out of college. So tell us your story.
Yeah. So I'm a total Midwesterner. I do live in Napa Valley now because I fell in love with warm weather and couldn't bear the winters, but I still consider myself a Midwesterner, still have a home in Cincinnati. All my family's there. So really fortunate to be from that part of the country. But for me, the love for real estate started when I was 5 years old. I had a hammer in my hand. My dad was a carpenter, so I always grew up around real estate. And when I was 17 years old, I saved up some pennies enough to put a down payment on a home. And that was my first investment property that we bought for $40,000. And my dad and I repaired it together. And then later we sold it. And that became like the start of my love for the real estate business. So when I was 18 years old, I immediately went and got my real estate license because I thought it would be, I had met some real estate agents and thought it would be a really interesting career and or hobby at the time. And it was all of that and more. So I sold real estate all through college. While I was in undergrad, I studied, I had a dual degree for architecture, as well as real estate development. It was more of a development-oriented degree than a real estate degree, but very much involved real estate. And then went on to law school after that. And while I was selling real estate through college, I found the prior real estate transaction process to be very inefficient. This was before electronic signatures and even digital forms to some extent had really been adopted in a meaningful way. And I found myself chasing clients all over town to get documents signed on the hood of my car. And that's what inspired the idea for Dotloop. And the original premise there was, what if we could make buying a home from a transaction perspective as seamless as buying a book on Amazon? And that was the original idea. We pursued that and built that business over a period of 6 or 7 years. Before becoming part of Zillow back in 2015. And then I stayed on at Zillow for about 4 years, left about 2 years ago now, took a year off and, lived abroad and pursued a bunch of bucket list items that had been in the queue for a while. And one of the other things that I did during my time off was spend a lot of time thinking about what I wanted to do next. And that's what led me to Pacaso.
That's awesome. And so I have to ask, because I like to get personal with people, what was the coolest bucket list item that you checked off while you took time off?
There were several of them. If I had to pick one, I would say that it was living abroad. I've always loved, I traveled abroad for the first time probably 7 or 8 years ago to Italy, and we fell in love with it. And we had a friend that operated and owns a hotel in Tuscany. and we just kind of fell in love with this little village. So we went and we lived there for a little over 3 months. We learned to speak Italian. We had trained with an Italian instructor, private instructor for several months. And then we did an immersion school in Siena, which was awesome to just totally immerse in a beautiful culture and speak the language. So that was definitely the coolest thing. And then probably the second coolest thing was learning how to fly. You know, I became a pilot and then got my instrument rating and absolutely fell in love with that as well. It's just a very mentally and intellectually stimulating challenge. There's a lot of variables, and actually flying the plane is obviously part of it. But I would say that the actual flying part is really only about 20% of the real enjoyment and satisfaction. The other 80% is everything that comes with it, like, you know, trip planning and understanding weather and talking to air traffic control and all the other things that come with it. It's just really intellectually stimulating and rewarding.
That's pretty awesome. That's something that anybody that's not a pilot would have no clue about any of that stuff. Once you started mentioning, I'm like, oh yeah, there are all kinds of things that go into flying a plane.
Totally.
So last personal question, you know, I had read somewhere that you're into endurance. Like what's one or two, you know, of the races you're most proud of accomplishing, or just, you know, just a feat you're most proud of accomplishing?
Yeah. So the one that comes to mind is my personal record marathon. So I basically never grew up running. When I was in college, I was probably, or just before I got into college, I was probably 70 pounds heavier than I am today. And it took everything I had to run a mile in under 8 minutes. And I started running, fell in love with it, I basically went and signed up for a 10K. At the end of that race, I saw a booth for the Cincinnati Flying Pig Marathon, signed up for the marathon, trained, ran the marathon, qualified for Boston, went and ran Boston. And then that kind of triggered this love for marathons. And one day this was a couple years after I had started running marathons, and I had kind of progressed from like mid threes, like a little over 3 hours in time, down to my best marathon was just under 3 hours. And I was sitting at the Cincinnati Marathon watching the winner cross the line, and he finished that year in like 2 hours and 35 minutes or something. And I thought to myself, if that guy can run a marathon in 2 hours and 35 minutes, I can too. And for those of you who aren't runners, a marathon in the 2:30s is very, very fast. It's like sub 6 minutes a mile. When you get into that range, you're close to being able to qualify to train for the Olympics. So it's a very aggressive time for 26 miles. And I set that goal, and I went and I posted on Facebook. I said, I'm going to run a marathon in the 2:30s. I published that goal to everybody I knew, including online. I went and I hired a coach, and I trained intensively for 6 months. I was running, and this was at the peak of building Dotloop. So I was very busy with work, but I woke up at 4:30 every morning, trained, religiously for probably 2 hours each morning. I ran an average of 13 miles a day, hill work, track work, the whole 9 yards for 6 months. And I ran a marathon in 2 hours and 36 minutes, wow. So the average time was 5 minutes and 55 seconds a mile for 26.2 miles. So that was definitely probably the highlight that comes to mind for endurance sports.
Dude, we could geek out on this all day long, but our audience can't probably. There's maybe one or two that are listening or they're geeking out with us. Dude, that's awesome. What was that marathon? The one that you did, the 2:36?
The Columbus Marathon.
Ohio. That's very cool, man. Very, very cool. And for anybody who's not a runner, or even if you are a runner, I set like big goals. And one of my biggest was I ran 2,018 miles in 2018, which requires the discipline to run on average like 6.4 miles per day. And it's not the physical feat, it's on your body, right? And you've got to mentally get past that and all that stuff. But so I can appreciate my fastest marathon is like 3:45. So I'm nowhere even in your class. That's awesome, dude. Have you ever done any long stuff, ultras by chance?
No, it's on my list, but I'm finding that as I as I age, it's pretty hard on the knees and the back. So I'm at a point now where I don't know if my body would really hold up to ultras. I don't think I was actually built to be a runner, believe it or not. Like I feel like I have like pretty thick bones and a fairly thick build, and I've kind of forced my body to become a runner body, but I don't know that I could really do long ultras. I did get into longer marathons. I do plan to do, triathlons. I do plan to do a full Ironman at some point, but I've done several long triathlons, including half Ironman. But that's on the list.
I love it, man. I love it. And I'm gonna just end this part of the conversation by telling our listener, like, this is something that I've always become fascinated with in business, with it, which is physical feats. Because one thing I always learned from mentors and listen to people speak and listening to uber successful people was that was one common denominator. A lot of them do something, right? Triathlons, marathons, biking, whatever, right? And I do believe that, because this is completely off topic from what we're going to talk about today, I do believe it's important. So if you're listening to this and you want to find success, pay attention to that, what I just pointed out to you, because it is something that's very important. I actually got to know Jesse Itzler. I don't know if you know Jesse, and that's where I started down the journey of doing this crazy stuff. But let's go back to real estate now. I'm gonna reel it back in because I selfishly would rather talk to you about this stuff all day. But let's talk about, so Dotloop, you mentioned kind of what caused you to start that. Then you sold it to Zillow. You went to work for Zillow, which is like a bad word in the industry. So it's interesting to talk to you because we don't usually talk to people that were on the inside. And you've become friends with like Spencer Raskoff, right? And he's a part of Pacaso now. What is your take on Zillow? Just before we get into Pacaso, like, what's your take on Zillow? Because you say that word in a room of real estate agents, you're going to get a lot of cuss words and a lot of groaning and a lot of moaning. What's your take on Zillow? And you were on the inside.
Yeah, so I have no affiliation with Zillow anymore, but I'm very fortunate for the opportunity to have spent 4 years there. I think it's an incredibly talented team. With a really interesting business. But I will say that having grown up from within the industry, like, I totally understand all the sensitivities and tension that exists between some agents and Zillow. And at Dotloop, we were part of the real estate industry. I mean, real estate agents were our primary customers. All of our biggest partners were real estate brands. We created the company because I was a real estate agent and wanted to make the real estate transaction process easier for real estate agents. So I very much, feel like I understand and relate with real estate agents, and I saw that at Dotloop as it relates to how the industry thought about Zillow at the time. But then I got on the inside, and frankly, the reason why I thought it made sense for Dotloop to become part of Zillow is because I was very inspired by Zillow's mission and by Zillow's team. I'm a big believer that whether you're building a real estate company or a software company or a restaurant, it doesn't matter. I think the most important thing is that the company is surrounded by great people, and that those great people are pursuing a mission that everybody believes in. And ultimately, hopefully it's a mission that's good for the world. And I think, while not everybody may agree with Zillow's, approach, I think Zillow is very motivated by improving the consumer experience. And at the end of the day, every great real estate agent that I talk to is frankly motivated by the same thing. Mm-hmm. Like, we're all in it to help consumers become homeowners and to realize their dreams. And if there's a way for us collectively as an industry to make that process better, I actually believe that is the right thing. And I think Zillow's intentions, are to do just that, to improve the customer experience. So I'm very fortunate for the opportunity to have worked at Zillow, but I also understand that not everybody agrees with their approach. And I don't feel that it's my place to really pick a side there.
Yeah, I poked it. I poked the bear a little bit, and I agree with you. Frankly, I mean, they're threatened. If an agent is threatened by Zillow, they need to look in the mirror, in my opinion. And I can say that because I'm not a real estate agent, but I coach and teach them. But that's my opinion, because I don't think if you do what you need to do, you can make yourself irreplaceable. And I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetime where Zillow is going to replace real estate agents. It's just not going to happen. Maybe years and years down the road, but we'll get off that one too. It's two soapboxes I've thrown you into. Sorry about that. So now you've moved on. So you went to college in Cincinnati. You founded Dotloop. You ran. You then chased some dreams. You're relatively young. Do you mind sharing what your age is?
Yeah, I'm 35.
So really young, especially in comparison to the average age of, the real estate industry. Right. And so now you're on to, startup number 2, and we're not talking about a painting here. We're talking about a better way or an opportunity to help the consumer buy a second home that they may not have been able to do. And so tell us about where the idea was conceived and what is it?
Yeah. So before I get into the specifics of what it is, I should just highlight that I'm a huge believer in following your passion. And that has really inspired my whole life, including my professional life. I started Dotloop because I was passionate about making the lives of real estate agents and real estate transactions more seamless. And that passion is the same thing that led me to Pacaso. So here's the story. It was about 7 years ago when my wife and I became second homeowners in Lake Tahoe. Prior to that moment, we had always dreamed about owning a second home, but never had access to one. It was merely, just a dream that was hard to realize because second homes are expensive, and most people only use second homes 5 or 6 weeks a year. So when you start to put all that stuff together, it's just very out of reach for most people. So when you survey consumers, you'll find that the vast majority of consumers over a certain income level aspire to own second homes. It's just a dream that many of us have once we've satisfied kind of life's basic needs of food and shelter. But yet it's a privilege that's only available to the top 1%. So my wife and I, we stretched and worked really hard to make this second home dream a reality 7 years ago. And it just totally changed our lives. Now Lake Tahoe is part of who we are. We met new friends, we established rituals, we have built so many memories at Lake Tahoe as a result of owning this second home. And the experience is so much different than when you go rent a home or stay in a hotel. I mean, you develop these rituals, you feel a certain way, you feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. You're able to get away to a place that feels safe and secure, where you can kind of unplug and recharge your batteries. And all that stuff is only made possible through a second home. So that inspired this idea, which is, what if we could find a way to make second home ownership possible for more people? Because you have tens of millions of families who aspire to own, but are unable to, largely due to reasons of cost. So about half of people surveyed who aspire to own a second home but don't, say that the reason why they don't own a second home is because they can't afford it. They either can't afford a second home at all, or they can't afford the second home that they want. But then there's a whole nother cohort of people, call it the other 50%, to use simple math right now, that want to own a second home, but just can't justify owning 100% of something that they're only going to use 10% of the time. So there's a big problem kind of on what I would describe as the demand side of this equation. But on the supply side of the equation, there are millions, tens of millions of homes all over the world, most of which sit vacant, second homes that sit vacant 10 to 11 months a year. So the whole idea behind Pacaso is, let's bring those two things together. Let's make better utilization out of second homes that are sitting vacant by creating a new category. We think of it as a new category of second home ownership that empowers people to buy a portion of a second home and enjoy the second home benefits, but for much less cost and hassle. So we created Pacaso to do just that.
That's really basic, but yet brilliant at the same time. Now, before I get deeper on Pacaso, as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, because I do own a second home, a couple of second homes myself, actually, and I know exactly that journey that you're talking about. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, yeah, I guess we do only use it that much, and I don't rent. So it reminds me almost of a timeshare-ish concept where you're buying into. I'll just give you an example. We bought into a property in Key West. We originally owned 2 weeks. We sold one. We own 1/52nd of our unit. Is it the same kind of concept to where is that what it is essentially?
It's very different than your classic resort timeshare there, but I'll highlight a couple of the key differences. The biggest is probably that this is true ownership. So most resort timeshare products, you're actually buying a right to use. Like if you buy into the Marriott Vacation Club, you don't actually own that real estate. What you're really buying is the rights to use a hotel room for 1/52nd of the year, which is 1 week per year. With Pacaso, it's true ownership. Like you could snap your fingers and make Pacaso go away. Like that's the test that I use. If you could snap your fingers and make Pacaso go away, who owns the house? And the answer is the people who bought the Pacaso. So our structure is a professionally managed LLC. So every home has its own LLC, and each of the owners just owns their pro rata share of the home through the LLC. So it's like true ownership versus right to use. That's the biggest difference. Second big difference is that these are residential single family homes. So the only way that you can get into one of these homes is to buy the whole thing. There's no other alternative versus resort timeshares tend to be hotel and apartment and resort-like products. And in most cases, you could actually go rent the same room through the hotel that you're buying through the timeshare. In this case, that's not the deal at all. The best analogy is actually what we describe as do-it-yourself co-ownership. And this would be the scenario where a couple of friends or family members decide that they want to own a house together. And the way that they would go do that is very analogous to what Pacaso does. We basically form an LLC, buy the home in the name of an LLC, and then we basically handle all the details. We handle everything from paying the bills to repairing things when they break to providing software tool that enables everybody to share the calendar in a really dynamic and equitable way. So it's actually not a new concept. Like people have been buying houses together for decades and decades, maybe longer. It's just new in the sense that we're making it hassle-free. You know, like it's very hard to go buy a house with a group of people on your own. Financing is hard. Divvying up the responsibilities is hard. If you want to resell your share, that's, you know, basically impossible without a product like Pacaso. So we're just taking the old do-it-yourself co-ownership model and making it better and risk-free and hassle-free so that people can basically right-size their ownership.
It's brilliant, man. I love it. I love it. And thank you for clarifying that because if I thought it, maybe somebody else did as well. So, okay, let's digress back to get the concept. You buy it in an LLC. Is it mortgaged? How is the property purchased?
So let me just start from kind of the moment that somebody comes into the Pacaso funnel, if you will.
I didn't go back far enough. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So basically, if you're interested in owning a second home, and I'm talking about a buyer now, a buyer can come to their real estate agent or directly to Pacaso, and Pacaso will engage their real estate agent in the transaction. And they basically can either find a home that's already available through Pacaso on our website, or they could bring a listing to us. So like, let's say that you found a house that you want to own in Malibu and you're willing to buy 25% of it. You could actually bring that listing to Pacaso, even if it's not on our website, and we will buy the other half of the home and then sell it to other vetted co-owners. So I'll start there with it's very flexible. Listings on our website, or go find a listing that you love and bring it to us. From there, what happens is we get the property under contract and we purchase it in the name of an LLC that we create, a property specific LLC. Once we close on the home, usually by the time we close on the home, we have half or so of the home pre-sold. And then we sell the remaining half of the home over a period of 30 to 60 days thereafter. But from the owner's perspective, the person that buys into the Pacaso, the second that you buy in and the second that we close, you are now an owner of that home through the LLC, and each owner gets access to their own owner app. From the owner app, you can see all the financial information about your house, where the money's flowing, because each owner pays their pro rata share of operating expenses. So you can open up the app and see that, $20 if your payment went to the utilities this month. The other thing that happens in the owner app, though, is we have a really innovative scheduling tool. We call it Smart Stay. And the way that works is you just simply block time in your home on the calendar. And you could do it with very short notice, with as little as 2 days notice, actually, or longer notice, where you could reserve time 24 months out, for example. And then what the scheduling tool does is it has a series of rules and algorithms that distribute the requests fairly but dynamically across the ownership group, so that if there's 4 or 5 families that own a house together, everybody's going to get most of what they want out of the home, but no single person is going to be able to take all the holidays, for example. The system has a way of ensuring that the time in the calendar is shared equitably across the group.
What about the investment mindset of it? Because I think a lot of people immediately think, that's another thing I was thinking was, all right, I'm only going to use it a couple weeks, 4 or 5 weeks a year. I'm going to rent the rest of it. Does this have any component to that, or is that just eliminating that? It's just simply the second home concept, and you don't have to come up with the entire 20% down payment. You don't have to pay 100% of the mortgage payment. Is there any investment piece in this whatsoever? And the follow-up question then is, because you mentioned it, and I think I know the answer to this, but when you own, if I own 10%, and I want to sell out, how does that work? Obviously, I assume you own that percentage of equity, right? So start with the first question and let's move on to that one.
Great. So basically, sorry, repeat the first question. I lost my train of thought.
So the first question was, gosh, now you made me lose my train of thought too. Sorry, you didn't. I lost my own train of thought. It was
we're getting old, Jeff.
Yeah. Oh God, dude, I'm older than you. I'm in my 40s. I cracked my 40s. So let's just go with the equity. I'll remember it, but let's go with the equity piece for it. Oh, the investment piece of it.
Yeah, the investment. Okay. So basically, the short answer is no. We do not think about this as an investment. If somebody is motivated by generating a return on their investment, we recommend that you go invest in the stock market or a public company REIT or something. This is not intended for investors. This is intended for people who are looking to own and occupy a second home for their own personal use and enjoyment. So we, as part of that, we actually explicitly prohibit rental activity in a Pacaso home. So if you own a Pacaso, you're allowed to gift a stay to a family member or a friend, for example, and we call those sponsored guests. But you're not allowed to take your share and go rent it out on Airbnb. We just don't allow that. And the reason why is, there's a bunch of reasons why, but I would say the most compelling reason why is because there's a big difference in an owner's mindset when compared to a renter's mindset. Renters treat houses like renters. They tear things up. They're very transient in nature. They're there for that weekend and they're not thinking about the long term. Owners are very different. Owners treat their homes like they care about the future because they have to pay for it and they do care about the home. So there's a really special difference in a Pacaso ownership group when compared to the dynamic that happens in a typical short-term rental. And most of our owners really value that. As for the other part of your question around what if I just bought a house and used it 5 or 6 weeks a year and rented the rest of the time out, that's a good program for certain people. And I did that with my home in Tahoe for a while. Actually, that's how I was able to pay for it at the time. So if you're interested, but here's what I would say. It's a good program for people who are interested in being landlords because it's work. It's real work. You know, you have people that come into your house and tear it up and steal things and break things and, you know, create nuisance that leads to neighbor complaints. Like, it's one thing after another. Hot tubs break at 2 a.m. and you get calls. Like, if that's the business you want to be in, if you want to add a lot of stress and complexity to your life in exchange for some extra income, then it's great, you know, to own properties like that for income. But what we find is that most people actually aren't into that. And you see it in the numbers as well. When you look at the total number of second homes, less than, far below 10%, probably closer to 5% of all second homes are listed for rent on Airbnb or Vrbo. 90 to 95% of second homes are not rented out. And that's because 90 to 95% of people prefer to not have that stress and hassle in their lives. And Pacaso now provides a better solution. So if you're one other thing that I'll add on this point is that when you talk to people who are doing this, you know, in many cases, except for the what Airbnb would call a super host that has, well, actually super hosts include single home operators as well, but there's many hosts out there that have multiple properties and they're clearly doing it for a business, right? They're doing it to make income and they're managing a portfolio. And that's a whole different ball game than the single home owner that's just doing it to help pay for their mortgage, right? What Pacaso does is empowers that single home owner that's merely renting to help offset their operating expense. Pacaso is now a different alternative that empowers them to lower their operating expenses by lowering the amount of ownership. So it's like you're able to get all that you would get out of owning the whole home, but for much less cost and much less hassle. So that's how I would think about it. And you want me to go on to the
yeah, I do, the equity piece, but I want to ask first, is there a minimum percentage that you require someone own? Or if I come in and say, Austin, I want 1% of your home, you know, I want that home in Tahoe for 1%. Can I have it?
No. So there is a minimum. So we split every home into a maximum of 8 interests. So you can buy a minimum of 1/8 of the home, which is 12.5%, and a maximum of 50% of the home. Because if you're buying more than 50% of the home, we recommend that you just go buy the whole home. Like, Pacaso is really, and this is one other thing that I'll add on this point. The way to think about this offering on the spectrum of occupancy is as follows. If you're only going to use a home one time a year or once every other year, you should go just rent a home on Airbnb or Vrbo or, you know, any of the other great sites that are out there that provide really good transient occupancy solutions. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're going to use a home more than 6 months a year, you should just go buy the whole home, because at that point in time, the benefits associated with 100% of the control, I think, outweigh the savings associated with the Pacaso model for people who are using more than 6 months a year. Pacaso is really for people who want to use more than once a year and less than 6 months a year. And in the past, there's really never been a good solution for that, other than do-it-yourself co-ownership or that accidental landlord use case that we were talking about before, where you buy a home and rent it out during the time that you're not using it, which is just a huge hassle for anybody who hasn't experienced that. Pacaso is now the solution for that audience. In terms of the equity question, so once you own a Pacaso, you own 100% of whatever you bought. Pacaso retains no ownership in these homes. So once a home is fully subscribed, Pacaso is merely the manager of the home. Pacaso is just taking care of the details so that you can enjoy your home without any hassle, which means that when you go to sell your Pacaso, you are entitled to 100% of whatever you sell it for. So the way that works is, let's say that you buy a Pacaso for $100,000, and 3 years later, you decide that you want to sell your Pacaso in Lake Tahoe and you want to start skiing Vail instead. What you can do is just go list your Pacaso, and you basically pick your price as a seller. And then the only difference when compared to the normal real estate transaction process is that the other owners in the ownership group have a first right to buy the property for your sale price. So if I decide to sell my share for $125,000, the other owners in the group get a first look. If they pass on the opportunity to buy that share, it then just gets listed like a normal real estate transaction. So we partner with real estate agents all over the country. We list the home with a real estate agent. It goes in the MLS. It publishes to Zillow and Redfin and the real estate agent's website or anywhere else that their normal listings would publish. And it also gets displayed on Pacaso, obviously. And then we find a buyer for the new share. And then again, it just transacts like real estate. The real estate agent represents the buyer in that transaction, just like they would a buyer in a whole home. It's just much faster, much more seamless, and less work for the real estate agent.
Wow. That's fascinating. So they set the price. The owner sets the price, and they could be, obnoxious about it because they think it's worth more than it is, or underprice it. But then again, the other owners have the right to it. That's absolutely fascinating. So when you sell it through the market, and you list it on an MLS, I guess you have to be very clear that that it is a Pacaso, I guess, or that you're buying a percentage of the home, correct? How does that work?
That's right. So when we publish through the MLS, we actually put a little badge on the hero photo that says co-ownership. So if you were to go look at Pacaso listings in the MLS right now, you would see this badge. And then in the first line of the listing description, we explain that it is a co-ownership opportunity. So it's very clear to the consumer what they're buying. And interestingly, most of the markets where we're going to be operating are markets that have a higher concentration of second homes. And in most of those markets, they already have resort fractional offerings as an option in the MLS. So there's already actually a distinction for this type of listing. Most people probably wouldn't know that unless you're an operator in one of these markets. So it works just like a normal listing. I mean, the only difference is the photo and the description. And as I mentioned, the workload is more like a referral for the real estate agent, because we basically do the heavy lifting around explaining the Pacaso model, and the real estate agent does the real estate part of the transaction, but we try to make that process very easy for our agent partners. And the other thing, since we're talking about agents and we have a big audience of agents here, the other thing that is a really important point, I think worth noting, is just how we work with agents. Basically, we work with agents on both sides of the transaction. So for all the Pacasos that we have, we partner with real estate agents in those markets to act as our listing agent. They publish in the MLS. And then when buyers come in, those buyers are represented by buyer's agents as well. If a buyer comes in that's unrepresented, we then refer that business to our listing agent partner, or partners, plural, in that market. So that's kind of how it works. What our agent partners really like best about this model is two things. One is that it's purely additive to the core business. So the example I like to use is here in Napa Valley, where I live. There's a lot of people who in San Francisco, which is the drive feeder market here, there's a lot of people who could afford a $500,000 second home from San Francisco. The problem is you're not going to get much for $500,000 in Napa Valley. The market's just too expensive. So all those $500,000 or $1 million leads that real estate agents have in this market are probably not going to transact into any business at all, because there's just no second home inventory that meets their buy box for that price point. With Pacaso, it empowers our real estate agent partners to convert those window shoppers into homeowners, because with $500,000 on Pacaso, you can buy an eighth of a $4 million home. And there's a lot of great homes for $4 million in Napa. So it's really a win-win and purely additive to agents' core business in the sense that it empowers them to convert more of their pipeline than they would have otherwise been able to convert. On the listing side, the second thing that agents really love is that Pacaso empowers them with a tool to go win more listings. And we call this tool a sell down. So imagine all those second homeowners out there that we described before that own 100% of their home that they're only using 5 or 10% of the time, but they don't want to sell the whole home because they love it. Therefore, it's not a, that home would have never converted into a listing for the agent because the seller doesn't want to sell. Well, with Pacaso, what you can do is you can empower the seller to sell down part of their home, which empowers the agents to go win listings that would have otherwise not been available had it not been for this new sell down product. And that's a really cool opportunity, because if you're one of these sellers and you sell down 75% of your home, you can pay off your mortgage, put a bunch of cash in your pocket, reduce your operating expenses by 75%, all while retaining the same amount of the home that you would have been using anyway. Mm-hmm. And it's a great program for real estate agents. And we pay, at minimum, we pay full commissions. But in some instances, we'll actually pay bonus commissions to our real estate agent partners, depending on how much business they bring through the Pacaso system.
Wow, dude, that's insane, man. So when you talk about the sell down piece of this, which is fascinating, and I actually wasn't even thinking to go down this path as we were talking, and I'm glad obviously you knew to bring it up. When you see this, like, that is presenting massive opportunity for agents. I mean, listen, real estate agents, this is huge. And so do you find, have you seen any agents have a certain technique or strategy to procuring sellers, or to kind of making that, how do they market this to where, you kind of put it on their radar that they may have not otherwise known? Because I'd never heard of this. That's fascinating. And it's brilliant. So have you seen any techniques there that any of our agents listening could take and run with?
Yeah. So we actually, if you go to Pacaso.com, Pacaso.com, there's an agent link at the top of the screen. If you click on that agent link, you could basically submit your information to receive our marketing kit. We'll send you the materials that you can use to email your past client database. So that's the first thing that we recommend that agents do, is they use these materials that basically promote the sell down feature, and they email their past client database, and they can also post it in their online communities. So that's what we found to be the most effective first step. And then once we build a relationship with various agents in these markets, there's more and more opportunity of things we can do together. So some of our agent partners we've partnered with them on mailer campaigns where here's an example. So here's a mailer. I don't know if you can see it. Sell half your home. Can you see that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this is a mailer campaign that we did in partnership with our agent. I don't know if you could see it. Hold on. There it is.
There it is.
So Elizabeth Olcott, Keller Williams, Napa Valley. So this is basically a Pacaso mailer in partnership with Elizabeth that empowers people to sell half their homes. And, we're going to do more and more and more of these. And Elizabeth is actually a great example. So Elizabeth, I don't know what her current numbers are, but in the first 90 days on Pacaso, she made $175,000 from Pacaso. And she's going to end up making millions over the course of the next 12 months. Wow. Because she was a first mover on the Pacaso model. And I think she was number like 3 or 4 in the market before, in terms of volume, maybe 5 in terms of transaction volume. And I think she'll be number 1 in 2021. She'll be the top agent in Napa Valley, because we're going to probably spend, $100 million that'll flow through Elizabeth in this market in 2021. So, and we want to do that in every market where there's demand for second homes. So we've gone out and we've partnered with really great institutional investors. We've raised several $100 million in debt that empowers us to convert whole homes to Pacasos. So there's a lot of real opportunity in the partnership between Pacaso and real estate agents. Like, we've got a great service that really adds value for people who want to own second homes in a smarter, lower cost way. And we need real estate agent partnerships to make that dream a reality for all these consumers. So it's really a win-win for everybody. And most importantly, though, it all goes back to the reason why we created this company in the first place, which is about making second home ownership accessible to more people. We describe the mission as enriching lives through second home ownership. So that's really what wakes us up every day and gets us excited, is we want to empower more people to experience what I experienced in Tahoe and what you experience with your second home, and what I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to with their second homes. It's a real privilege to be able to unlock that second home ownership dream. And that privilege should not be limited to the top 1%. Together, we can make it available to the top 15 or 20% of the world. And that's pretty exciting.
That's amazing. I'm looking at the site now too, and they've got a commission breakdown. So for you agents, under the agents tab, you can actually see what this equates to. Last question, and we'll wrap up. Is there any particular, like, so if I'm sitting here thinking, you mentioned this earlier, like, I don't think you're coming to St. Louis anytime soon, or Cincinnati, for example. What are the markets? Like, what are you guys looking for? And I know you said second homes, but I don't think you're coming to probably the Lake of the Ozarks, which is that's all second homes there. Tell us a little bit, so that way an agent can put it in their mind. Okay, am I in one of those potential markets where Pacaso might come?
Yeah. So the way that I would think about it is, if you're in a second home destination, Pacaso will be in that market eventually. Like right now, we're technically available in about 20 markets or so. And by available, what we mean there is we're set up to do business in those markets. We have some agent partnerships already in place. And there's enough second home demand that we've gone and we've vetted the market and we're ready to go. It doesn't necessarily mean we have listings in those markets yet. In terms of the markets where we're doing the most activity, they're mostly West Coast focused at the moment. So several markets in California, places like Lake Tahoe, Napa Valley, Malibu, Laguna Beach, Palm Springs, Scottsdale, Park City, Colorado. So those are kind of the areas that we're most focused right now. And the reason why we're focused there is because we're very demand influenced. We're basically following where we're seeing the most demand and making sure that our efforts are concentrated there. But over the course of the next 6 months or so, you're going to see us start to expand into more geographies. So if you're an agent in one of these markets, whether it's, Ozarks or Miami Beach or wherever, you should absolutely reach out to Pacaso, because we could be doing business together, whether it's this week or 6 months from now. I'm not sure. It will depend on a variety of factors. But I would say that like, if you have clients that are interested, one way that we can basically start doing business together, like right away in a market, is if you have a client that is interested in a listing and that client is willing to buy 25 or 50% of that home, we'll buy the other half. And the beauty of that model, I think you could see this on our website. We call this the lead buyer commission. If you bring a buyer that will buy 50% of a home, we'll basically pay you 3 times on that transaction. So here's how that works. Let's say that you have $1 million buyer that wants a $2 million home. You'll get paid on the $1 million that you brought. You'll get paid on the $1 million that we buy, the other half, and then we'll actually pay you to relist the home as our listing agent. So you'll get somewhere between 2 and 3 times the amount of commission that you would have earned on that $1 million buyer. So regardless of whether or not, the long-winded way of saying, regardless of whether or not you see your market on our website, you should still reach out to us, especially if you have clients that are have a home that they're interested in and willing to buy 25 or 50% of. And then if you're in a market that's not a popular second home destination, like Cincinnati or St. Louis, then think about Pacaso as a referral opportunity. People in St. Louis and Cincinnati are absolutely traveling to these markets. I know a lot of people.
100%.
Yeah, I know a lot of people in Cincinnati that own places in Hilton Head or Myrtle Beach or Florida. So if you're in one of those markets, this is a great referral source. You can refer business out, but the beauty is with Pacaso, you get paid full commission, not just a referral commission. So if you're in Cincinnati and you have somebody that wants to own in Miami Beach and you refer them to Pacaso, you'll get paid as if they bought a whole home with you. And it's the workload of a referral. So it's a really great program across the board. And then on your point about Ozarks, Jeff, I think for the next, call it 6 to 12 months, most of our activity is going to be in the top 15 second home destinations. But beyond that, like 18 months from now, and certainly beyond that, we absolutely plan for Pacaso to be in some of these secondary and third kind of second home markets that have less density in terms of number of homes and number of people, but are very locally relevant. Like Ozarks is very relevant
in the Midwest,
to a lot of people who go to that market, but it's not as nationally, prominent as something like Aspen or Scottsdale. So those second tier destinations are hugely important. We just don't yet have the scale to be in all of those markets yet.
Dude, I love it, man. I mean, that just opened up so many possibilities for every agent in the country, because like you said, you're not coming to St. Louis or any other Timbuktu, St. Louis type city, but people that live in those cities are buying, and you have those. Now you as an agent have the opportunity to be the buyer's agent for somebody buying in wherever, right? Yep. I mean, endless. That's so cool, dude. This is great. I mean, the concept in and of itself was totally worth a podcast. This just took it to another level. This is great, man. I think we need to do this again in another 6 months as you guys have continued to evolve, because I think we got to get this out there to more people. This is really, really cool. The concept, like, I'm interested. I'm going to go searching it because I'm a second homeowner and want to be more of a second homeowner. And from a real estate agent perspective, gosh, this is going to create some massive opportunity. And like you said, maybe it's secondary, or like the gal that you mentioned in Napa. I mean, she's going to make over $1 million doing this. It's going to be a firsthand job for her. So this is awesome, dude. This is great, man. Any parting thoughts?
Yeah. The parting thought would be, enriching lives. This is not just about selling homes. I mean, the same thing that motivates all of us about like helping consumers to realize their dreams. Now more than ever, we have an opportunity to empower people with a more enriched life. And I think that's super, super special. And we can only do it in partnership with real estate agents. So, being a real estate agent myself and having spent my whole career in the industry, I have a ton of respect for what everybody on this call does. And I'm really fortunate for the opportunity to build a business in partnership with the industry. So I'm just very excited about the opportunity to enrich people's lives together. So thank you.
Awesome, man. So if anybody wants to get in contact with you, the best place, I assume, is the Pacaso.com. So it's Pacaso.com. Any other places they can find you? Are you guys on Instagram? Are you on Facebook? Are you on any of the social?
We're on, all the social channels, and our handles are at Pacaso Homes. So definitely look us up on Instagram. We usually post, interesting featured listings there. We'll feature our agent partners from time to time on social, but the website is the best place to start. And make sure you submit your information from the agent page, and that basically puts you in our partner database, and we can start sending you materials that you can use to go win more listings and also convert more of your buyer pipeline into homeowners. So I think that's really step one.
Fantastic, Austin. This has been amazing. What you guys are doing is epic. I'm actually kind of now thinking ahead, and I'm going to ask you that question the next time we talk, which is, what's going to be the third startup? I'm sure you've already thought about it, but we'll have to do that on another episode. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you for being on. This is fantastic, guys. Go check this out, Pacaso.com/agents if you just want to jump straight to it, and go sign up for this. This is probably on infancy level, so you've got an opportunity here. So get it while the getting is good. Austin, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Jeff.
LabCoatAgents Podcast.